You can save diligently, invest wisely, and even retire with 7 figures in your account. But one wrong move at the exact wrong time can end up costing you hundreds of thousands in extra taxes throughout your retirement. And most people have no idea that they even made a mistake. Over the last 10 years, I've helped hundreds of Canadians retire with confidence. But all of a sudden, I keep seeing this same mistake come up over and over again. So in this video, we're going to walk you through what that mistake is, why it happens even though you have the best intentions, and what you can do to avoid this trap yourself. By the way, if you're watching this and you want to avoid the same mistake that John is making, then check out our free guide in the description where we go over exactly how to make RRSP withdrawals the smart way. Over the last few years, you might have noticed a lot of videos going over the RRSP meltdown. I've made a lot of those videos. But what I keep seeing over and over again is the same mistake when applying this strategy in real life. So today we're going to go over a client that we met with just a few weeks ago. We'll call him John. And we're going to go over the RRSP meltdown mistake he was making and how we can avoid it. So let's just jump right into it. So John is 64. He is a widower and receiving a pension of $35,000 per year that belonged to his spouse. He also has $800,000 in his RRSPs, $140,000 in his tax-free savings account, and $250,000 in a non-registered account. So like I said, he's 64 today. His plan with CPP was to take it at 65, and he was on track to receive just over $1,400 per month. And he was also going to receive OAS at 65, which at that point would be around $739 per month. He did own his own home, but we're going to leave it out of this example. And as far as expenses are concerned, he was looking to spend $6,000 per month after tax. And we have that amount going up every year with inflation of 3%. So just so you can keep up with the cost of living, because as we know, the price of everything tends to go up over time. So John had watched a lot of videos on YouTube going over the RRSP meltdown strategy. So let's just touch briefly on what that is. And I'm going to bring up the combined Manitoba and federal tax rates. And it's going to be very similar in any province that you're in. So in Manitoba, on your first call at $16,000 of income, you're not paying any tax. And then as you make more money, your income bracket or income tax bracket increases over time until eventually you're over 50%. So with the RRSP meltdown strategy, the idea is to take money out of your RRSPs while you're in a lower tax bracket, because what ends up happening is upon your death, whatever's left in your RRSP or your RIF all gets taxed in 1 year. So in John's case, if he died tomorrow with $800,000 in his RRSPs, his income would be $800,000 and he'd be paying tax at over 50% on a good portion of this. So John had watched a lot of these videos and he wanted nothing to do with paying 50% tax. He had a couple of kids that he wanted to make sure that this money went to, and eventually grandkids he was hoping. So his plan was, I'm going to take out as much as I can and stay under the 50% tax bracket and just empty out my RRSP as fast as possible. So he was going to bring his income up to $253,000 every year, and the most taxes he was going to pay was be about 47.58%. So he was going to maximize all of these brackets with the intention of drawing down his RRSP completely to avoid paying 50% tax down the road. So let's go back to our example and let's see what the figures look like. So here we have John's situation over the next, call it 20 years. So his life expectancy in his mind was around age 85. He was still in good health. He was actually still doing a few Ironmans this summer. And as far as what his plan looked like, we have this is a net worth over time. We have his registered accounts in blue, TFSA in yellow, non-registered in brown. So what would end up happening is, as we can see, he's drawing on his registered accounts fairly aggressively, and they're pretty much depleted in 4 years. So what ends up happening, he has his pension. He's going to have his CPP starting next year, and then the withdrawals from his RRSPs, he's going to use that to fund his expenses. And whatever he doesn't need on top of that for his expenses goes into a non-registered account, and we keep topping up his TFSAs. So he draws down his RRSPs pretty quickly, and starting in year 5 of retirement, he doesn't have any RRSPs anymore. So he's gotten rid of that huge tax liability. Now, a couple issues with this strategy. What John forgot was that if he starts his OAS at 65 and is drawing substantially from his RRSPs, his income is going to be too high and his old age security is going to be fully clawed back. So there's no point in starting his RRSPs at 65 if his income is going to be over $250,000 like he's planning to do. But regardless of his plan, he was still in good shape. As far as cash flow is concerned, his plan was 140% funded, so no issues there. And he'd still be leaving an estate of just over $1 million at age 85. Now, what does that look like, though, as far as comparing it to a meltdown strategy that's more gradual over time? So here's an alternative that we went through with John. So rather than being so aggressive with those RRSP withdrawals early in retirement, we want to slow things down a little bit. So what we want to do is delay his CPP and OAS to age 70. So why do we want to do that? We want to do that because that's going to give us more time over the next, call it 6 years. He's 64 today, so all the way to 70, to draw more from his RSPs without having to worry about the clawback and any extra income from CPP. And then he also gets the bonus for deferring the CPP and OAS, which is going to come in handy down the road. So let's delay his CPP and OAS to 70, and then let's take a look at our withdrawal strategy. So let's switch that up and not be as aggressive with our withdrawals. So we're going to touch on what that is in a second. But as we can see here, the registered accounts are now more slowly going down over time. So what we're actually doing is we're targeting an income of about $115,000 until 2035. Why 2035? Well, at that point he turns 70 and his OAS is starting, and we don't want to go over the clawback threshold because we want to receive OAS. So at that point we reduce our target income to $93,450. So what does that mean? He has his pension, CPP, and OAS, and then he makes RRIF withdrawals or RSP withdrawals to get his income up to $93,000. Now, by targeting 115, if we go back to our Manitoba tax brackets, we're basically maximizing the 38% tax bracket. And so we're not going into the 43 or 46 or 47% tax bracket. We're being a lot more slow with our withdrawal strategy. Now, you might notice, well, what the heck, Mark, we're still, he's still passing away with quite a bit in his registered accounts, which is true. So at age 85, there's still about $370,000 left in his RSPs, or RRIF, I should say, at that point. Now, if we go back to our tax brackets, that would put him in the 51.26% tax bracket. But let's not forget that that is 20 years down the line. So in theory, these tax brackets should go up with inflation as well. I say should because that doesn't always happen. So as an example, this year, the Manitoba government said we're freezing the tax brackets. They're not going up with inflation, which in my mind is just a sneaky way to increase taxes, but they should go up over time. So if he has $380,000 left in his RRIF at age 85, potentially that will put him in a 43 or even a 38% tax bracket because these will go up as well. So something to consider, even though he is passing with some money in his registered accounts. So as far as what this strategy looks like, so in the previous scenario, his net estate was just over $1 million, but by doing this, his net estate is $1.3 million. So it's almost $300,000 more that he gets to pass on to his kids at age 85, and he's still fine from a cash flow perspective. We're now over 150% funded for retirement. But you might be asking yourself, well, what if he doesn't live that long? Which is a absolutely fair point. He could die in 5 years, in 10 years. How do the two strategies compare in that scenario? So let's go back to our original plan, or I should say John's original plan, and let's take a look at his estate at different time periods. So let's focus on 2036, which we'll call it 10 years from now. So at that point, his registered accounts are fully depleted. He has $369,000 in his TFSA and $555,000 in his non-registered account for a total net worth, again, we're not including his home, of $925,000. Upon death, there's a CPP death benefit, $2,500. Thank you very much, government. And then he would have some income tax payable of $13,000. That is probably some capital gains on his non-registered accounts, and then a bit of T3 income from his non-registered portfolio as well. So once you factor in those transactions, we're looking at a net estate of $913,000. Now, if we implement the strategy that we just went over of delaying CPP and OAS and starting those withdrawal a lot more slowly over time, let's compare what that net estate would be. So in 2036, we still have $450,000 in the registered accounts, which is going to be all taxable. TFSAs are the same amount because we're maxing out every year, and then non-registered is $395,000. So we have significantly more money, $1.2 million, but we're going to have to pay a lot more taxes, as we'll see here. So $2,500 is this death benefit for CPP that's coming in, income tax $258,000, which is we're going to have to pay out, and then some T3 income as well. So the net estate in this scenario is $960,000. So 10 years down the road, John will still be ahead using this strategy. Now, if we look 5 years down the road with this plan that's more optimized for the long term, we're looking at 826,000. But if we go back to his original strategy, we're at 861,000. So he is correct that if something happens to him within 5 years, I'd say the break even is probably between 7 to 8 years. Then his strategy to draw down the registered accounts very aggressively works out in his favor. But if he lives any longer than that, then there's no sense in going into the 40% tax bracket today. You're better off to make those withdrawals a lot more slowly over time and smooth out your tax brackets or your taxable income over time. So again, I can't answer this question for John. He has to make that decision whether or not it's important to him to get that money out. But just based on his health, and again, he's still doing Ironmans, chances are he's probably going to live 7 to 8 years. So then strategy 2 looks a lot better. And if something changes with John's health, let's say he gets diagnosed with an illness and he has 5 years to live, we can still change the strategy and get a lot more aggressive with our registered withdrawals as well, because we know that if you shorten life expectancy, then being more aggressive with your withdrawals will make sense. Now, if you want help building out your own RSP withdrawal strategy, or if you just want to make sure that you're not making a John-style mistake, that's what we're here for. Check out the link in the description and book a complimentary call. So hopefully now you know how to navigate your RSP meltdown strategy. But if you want to make sure that you get things right, then check out this next video where we go over 3 hacks to make sure that you're drawing down your RSPs efficiently without overpaying on tax and losing out on your old age security.